In this video, we are going to look at some different types of functions and how to identify the function based on the relationship between the elements in the domain and the range. So first off, a reminder that a relation is any set of ordered pairs. So that could be given as a set of ordered pairs, a mapping diagram, a table, or it could be a scatter plot graph. We can identify what those ordered pairs are. A function is then a relation in which each element of the domain is paired with one element in the range. So basically the x values or the elements in the domain do not repeat. So let's take a look at some examples here with these mapping diagrams. So the elements on the left, that represents our domain. Elements on the right represents our range. This example here, we see each element in the domain goes to a different element in the range. But we have one element here that does not correspond to any element in the domain. So this is an example of one-to-one. So each element in the domain pairs to exactly one unique element in the range. Okay, so x's don't repeat. That means it's a function. The y's don't repeat, so it's one-to-one. But we're not including this number 2 to any element in the domain. So it's just one-to-one, and another word for that is injective. This example here, all of our elements in the domain correspond to an element in the range, but 2 of our domain elements go to the same range element. So it is not one-to-one. It doesn't go to a unique element, but all of the values listed in our range they do correspond to an element in the domain. So that means it is onto or surjective. This example here is both one-to-one and onto, which means it's bijective. So each element in the domain goes to a unique element in the range. Okay, so each one goes to something different, and each element in the range corresponds to an element in the domain. This example here is neither, because we have a value or an element that doesn't correspond to a value in the domain, and then we've got a value in our range that corresponds to 2 separate elements in the domain. And then this example here is not a function because our x values repeat. So we've got this element a that goes to 2 separate values in the range. So that's not a function. So now we're going to take a look at 3 examples, a set of ordered pairs, a mapping diagram, and a table, and talk about the domain and range, which if you need some review, I've got a separate video on domain and range. And we'll look at if it's a function or not, and if it is a function, which of these can we label that as. So this example, we've got 4 ordered pairs here. So pause, try to answer these questions here. Okay, so our domain is, because it's a 4 unique ordered pairs, 4 different points on the graph, it's not a continuous line, then our domain and our range, we have to list out each element individually from least to greatest. So our domain has -2, 0, 3, and 5 included in it. And then our range has -4, 1, and 2 included. And since our 1 repeats, we only need to write it once. Now this represents a function simply because all of our elements in the domain are separate, that none of them repeat. So it is a function, and then if we look a little closer, we realize that this is a function that is onto, which means that each element in our range corresponds to an element in our domain. But because this y value repeats, it's not one-to-one. Okay, so this is an example just like this here. So that's onto. Okay. Another example. Now we have a mapping diagram. Quick pause and answer these. Okay, so our domain here, again, we just have to list out our values from least to greatest. So we've got -3, -1, and 4. Our range is 2, 5, and 8. And we see that all of our values in our elements in our range are being used. And each value in our domain goes to exactly one element in our range. So this is a function that is both one-to-one and onto, or bijective. So now we're going to look at one more example, this time with a table, and pause again, check how you would answer these. Okay, so our domain here includes -5, 0, and 2. Our range includes -8, -2, 2, and 8. This one has two elements in the domain, or two of the same values listed with different y values. So this represents an example that is not a function because our x values repeat.